Let's talk about Edmund Burke. Now, you probably know his name as one of the godfathers of modern conservative politics. But what if I told you that his most powerful political ideas were actually shaped by something totally unexpected? His theory of art and beauty. Just listen to how he described the French Revolution in his most famous book. He wasn't seeing liberation or progress. He was looking at a terrifying, chaotic monster, a total collapse of everything that held society together. And he was one of its absolute fiercest critics. Okay, so here's how we're going to unpack this. First, we'll look at the Burke everyone thinks they know, the politician. Then we're going to dig into this kind of mysterious prequel to his politics. We'll define his two key ideas about emotion, then connect it all back to his political firestorm, and finally see why this whole thing still really matters today. So, first things first. What did Burke actually stand for politically? Well, at its core, his entire philosophy was a massive defense of tradition. He was pushing back hard against what he saw as the dangerous, abstract, and frankly, arrogant ideas of the revolutionaries. He argued that we have to conserve the social fabric, He believed that the collective wisdom built up over centuries was way more reliable than the hot new ideas of any single generation. Now, he wasn't against change completely, but for him, it had to be slow, gradual, and careful. The most important thing was a deep, deep reverence for the established order. But here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn. What if I told you that the real foundation for all those political beliefs wasn't hammered out in Parliament, but in a book he wrote about art and emotion more than 30 years earlier? Check out this timeline. Way back in 1757, decades before anyone was even thinking about the French Revolution, Burke publishes this super influential essay on aesthetics, basically the philosophy of how we feel about art. There's a 33-year gap between that book and his big political masterpiece. So that's the central mystery we're going to solve, right? How on earth does a book about feelings explain his political rage? Well, to figure it out, we need to understand the two massive, powerful emotions that he identified as the pillars of our experience, the sublime and the beautiful. Burke basically believed that all of our most intense feelings could be sorted into two major and completely opposite categories. So first up, let's talk about the sublime. So for Burke, the sublime is what hits you when you're confronted with something that reminds you of just how small and mortal you are. Pain, he said, is an emissary of death. But, and this is the key, when you experience that terror from a safe distance, it becomes thrilling, it becomes awe-inspiring. It's this incredible feeling of delightful terror. And then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've got the beautiful. This is all about pleasure. It doesn't scare us or challenge us, it just pleases us. It's gentle, it's calm, it's positive. It's what we find lovely and charming, not what leaves us speechless with awe. And you can really see the stark contrast here. The sublime is born from pain and terror. The beautiful comes from pleasure. The sublime is vast and rugged. The beautiful is small and smooth. They are fundamentally different ways of experiencing the world. So for the sublime, picture a vast, stormy ocean or a towering, rugged mountain range, something that makes you feel tiny. And then for the beautiful, contrast that with a single, delicate flower. The sublime is a dark, ancient forest, filled with shadows and mystery. You don't know what's in there. Versus the beautiful, which is like the soft, delicate light on a perfectly polished, smooth surface. Okay, so now we have all the pieces of the puzzle. How does all this, the vast, the small, the terrifying, the pleasant, connect back to Burke's absolute fury over the French Revolution? For Burke, the answer was crystal clear. He was looking at society through this exact same lens. He didn't see a simple machine that you could just take apart, fix, and put back together based on some rational plan. No, he saw something much, much bigger. And this is the heart of his entire argument. He believed that a stable, traditional society was a sublime entity. Think about it. Its history is vast, stretching back beyond memory. Its inner workings are obscure and impossibly complex. And its power, the power of the state, of the monarchy, is terrifying. You don't get to just take that apart to see how it works. You stand back in awe and respect it. The revolutionaries, with their neat and tidy reason, were like children trying to tame a hurricane. Now, this isn't just some dusty old historical curiosity. Burke's theory gives us a really fascinating way to think about our own political instincts, and maybe even where they come from. And that's the big takeaway here. The idea that what we find awe-inspiring versus what we find merely pleasant or logical could be a huge indicator of our political worldview. I mean, ask yourself, do you feel a sense of awe for long-standing institutions? Or do you see them as things that should be rationally improved and updated? So just to recap, Burke's blistering attack on the French Revolution was actually rooted in a theory of emotion he'd worked out 30 years earlier. He saw tradition as sublime, something awesome, powerful, and terrifyingly complex. And he saw the revolution as a foolish, weak attempt to reduce that terrifying grandeur down to a simple, logical plan. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful thought to end on. Look around you, at nature, at history, at our institutions. What inspires that feeling of awe in you, that delightful terror? And how does that feeling shape what you believe and who you are? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.